Hello, and thank you for purchasing the Digital Woodcarver 6-watt laser. My name is Laney Shaughnessy, and in this video I will be taking you step by step through the installation, setup, and use of your new laser attachment. Let's start by looking at the contents of your package. You should have received the following items: a protective tinted laser skirt, 2 1/4 by 4-inch hex head bolts, 2 1/4 wing nuts, your laser and mounting bracket, as well as the laser module control box, and a set of laser safety glasses. It is highly recommended that you wear the laser safety glasses in conjunction with the protective laser skirt when operating the digital laser. Now let's get started by installing the laser to the mounting bracket. The following parts that you'll need is a 7/16" wrench, the 2 1/4 by 4-inch bolts, and the 2 1/4 wing nuts, as well as your laser and mounting bracket. Okay, we need to start by removing the 2 1/4 by 3-inch bolts that are mounted to the front of the mounting bracket that are holding the vacuum housing in place. Go ahead and take your 7/16" wrench and remove the 2 1/4 nuts, and from the top of the vacuum housing loosen the 2 1/4 nuts on both sides. This will allow you to be able to unscrew and remove the 2 bolts. As you can see here, we're winding the nuts all the way up. That way we can remove the 2 bolts, and your bolts may slide out, or you may need to use your wrench to loosen them up, and then you should be able to hand turn them out. Once those 2 1/4 bolts are removed from the front of the mounting bracket, we can go ahead and replace them with the 2 4-inch 1/4 bolts that were included with your package. As you're sliding the bolts up through the vacuum housing, make sure you do reinstall the 2 nuts. When you get it in place, tighten the lower nut, but don't over tighten. We don't want to crack the clear acrylic vacuum housing. And then take the upper nut and give it a little turn, and do the same thing for the other side. Now once both of the 4-inch bolts are in place and all of the nuts are secured, we can go ahead and mount the laser. We're going to take and just slide it right over the top of the 2 bolts, and then reinstall or install the new wing nuts that were provided. Alright, once both sides are secure and the laser is mounted properly, we can move on to wiring the connections in the control box. Alright, we're going to start off by getting our laser module control box and our digital woodcarver control box on the top of the table. Make sure that you unplug the control box. Very important. Also unplug the USB cable from your computer so there's no electricity. Now if you look at the back of your control box, you should see a black plug depending on your unit and model. We're going to remove that plug, and we're going to do that from the inside. So the first thing we need to do is remove the 3 screws on the side of the box and the 4 screws on the top of the box, and then the 3 screws on the other side of the box to remove the cover. A Phillips screwdriver is all you need for this, or you can use a Phillips screw gun. Alright, once all the screws are removed, then we can go ahead and lift the cover off. And now would be a good time, if you haven't done so, to blow out the control box. Any dust or anything that might be in there, you can take your vacuum blower and blow it out. Let's go ahead and start by removing the plug. I'm using the back of a wrench, a blunt object, just to pop that plug out of the back, and it should pop out easily. And save that plug for whatever reason. Not, there's really no reason to, but you never know. You might need it for if you want to make another hole in the control box in case you ever upgrade to a spindle or something. Now, with our laser control module, we want to go ahead and unwrap the cables, and the big orange cable and gray cable attached. At the end of it, there is a cable box connector, and let's take the nut off of that connector and slide it off of the wires. Okay. Once we have that off, we can go ahead and feed the wires through from the back of the unit through the hole where the plug was. And once we get the wires in, make sure that all of the wires go in through the hole. And for right now, we're just going to kind of pull them out to the side like this. We'll organize them in a moment. Let's go ahead and slip that nut back onto the wires and secure the connector and wire harness to the box. You can use a flathead screwdriver to grab the teeth of the nut, to kind of tighten it up, make sure it's nice and firm. And once we've done that, we're now ready to organize and connect our wires. So you've got a gray wire, then you'll have a black, white, and a green. So the wire harness, what we're going to be looking for is our 5 amp breaker, the bottom terminal, the ground connector at the bottom of the box, and then the white neutral cables go into the gray and orange 5-pin connector. Let's start with the gray wire and let's feed it through carefully under the other wires, and let's bring that towards the front of the box. So just feed it through. And once we have it fed through, we can just kind of let it sit there. We'll connect it last. Now, starting with the green wire, we need to connect that to the grounding lug in the bottom of the box. We want to make sure that we either take a small wrench, or I'm using a pair of needle nose pliers here. Let's go ahead and take that nut off, or at least loosen it up and get the green wire from our harness onto that lug. I'm feeding the green wire through and kind of organizing, getting underneath the black cable that was there so that it's a direct line. And then we can go ahead and re-secure that nut on the grounding bolt. Alright, I'm going to take my needle nose and just secure that nut, making sure that it's tight. There we go. And now we can take our black wire, has a double connector on the end of it. You'll see that connector attached. We're going to be connecting that to the lower terminal of the 5 amp breaker. Now we're going to remove the wire that's on that lower terminal, and we don't want to just pull on the wire. So I'm using a pair of needle nose to grab the head of it, and we're going to unplug that from the 5 amp breaker. We're going to take that wire that we just unplugged and we're going to plug it into the spare connector on the back of that black wire. Okay, and then we're going to plug the black wire that has the main connector there. We're going to plug that back onto the 5 amp breaker. There we go. All right, now the last wire that we need to do is the white ground. And we want to go ahead and, if we need to, retwist the exposed copper wires, get a nice, in there. And we want to look at the 5-pin connector there, the gray and orange connector. And all 5 pins may be taken up, so we want to lift that orange lever all the way up and pull out one of the wires. And we're going to twist the 2 white wires together, making sure that we have a good twist and connection. And then we're going to lift that lever all the way up so it locks in the open position, and we're going to slide those combined wires into the connector, and then we're going to drop that lever down to lock them in and make sure that they're seated firmly and they don't slide out or anything, and we're all done. All right, that takes care of the main connections. Now we need to focus on the small gray wire that we ran to the front, and that's going to be connected to our CNC USB Controller MK3 box, and we're looking for the green terminal on the top right of the box. Now on that terminal, the second pin is going to be output 2, and the second pin from the bottom is going to be our ground. Now notice the ground has a wire in it, so we're going to be removing that in just a moment. Now on our cable, we have a white and a green wire. The white wire is going to go into the output 2, which is the second pin from the top. And then the green wire is going to go on our ground, which is the second pin from the bottom. We're going to start with the ground wire, and what we need to do is loosen up the screw, a small flathead screwdriver to loosen up the screw, and we're going to remove the wire that is in there, maybe a white wire depending on the color code. And we want to install the green wire first into the opening. And once it's in place, make sure that the copper is nice and smoothed out so it'll go in and sit in firmly. Once it's in place, we're going to reinstall the wire back into the ground terminal that we had removed prior. So once those are seated back into that terminal, make sure they are seated completely in, so it will slide all the way in. There we go. And we want to go ahead and retighten the screw to secure those wires in that terminal. Alright, now we want to install the white wire into output 2, and I'm using a pair of vice grips here, or not vice grips, needle nose, as just a second pair of hands. It's a small area to get in there, and we're going to slide that wire in, holding it in place, and then we're just going to secure it by locking down that terminal. And that completes the installation of the cables. And so now we can put the cover back on the box and reinstall the cover screws, the 3 on each side and then the 4 on the top. Once all of the screws are back in and the box is enclosed properly, we can go ahead and put it back on the shelf of the digital wood carver. Alright, now we need to talk about cable maintenance. So we're going to set the control box on top of the little module box on top of the control box, and we want to uncoil the gray cable, and we want to make sure that we match the length and run of the X, Y, and Z axis cable. So what I'm doing here is I'm just getting started, got my module box in position, and I'm going to zip tie the cables together to get them positioned. And then we're going to go ahead and just follow that loop around, and we're going to add zip ties as we move up those cables. So go ahead and secure the zip ties firmly. And once you have them firmly zip tied, you can go ahead and trim the excess zip tie by using a pair of cutters and cutting the excess of that zip tie off. So we have a nice clean bundle there. All right. So now moving up, we're going to continue this all the way up, and we're going to add an additional zip tie towards the upper part of the cables. Trimming off the excess of the zip tie, and then we can go up to the top of the unit. Now on the back of the unit we have our cat run, and on the top of the cat run are these ribs, and if you take your screwdriver, there's a slot in the top of the ribs that you can just twist and they will unlock like a hinge, so they'll lift up on one side. So we want to go ahead and release all of the cat track ribs, and we're going to go about halfway down the run. And a little flathead screwdriver fits in there nicely. Just give it a little twist and it will pop open those tracks. Now once we have those up, we can go ahead and feed our cable through. And as I said, we want to go about halfway through the run. And I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity while I have the cat track open. And not only am I going to run my new laser cable, but I've got a digital probe, so I'm going to run the cable of the digital probe in there as well and do some cable maintenance that you'll see in just a moment. So that's my laser cable, and here's my digital probe cable, and I'm going to go ahead and run that into the cat track as well while I have those ribs open. If you do not have the digital probe, this step will not be, completed, of course. All right, we can go ahead and start snapping the ribs back down and locking them in, closing them up. All right, we want to run the cables to where about halfway down that cat run, and we should end up right, if we have the CNC's router and router cradle and everything on the Y gantry, if we have it in about the middle of the Y gantry, that's where we want the cables to extend out of. We want to go right to the back side of the router cradle, and that should give us plenty of excess hanging out of the cat track for free range movement back and forth on our Y axis. As you can see, my digital probe cable, just the head is sticking out the cat track, but I've got a good couple of feet. But we want to make sure that we have movement back and forth on that CNC, and we need to make sure that we don't put too much of the laser cable in the cat track, or we won't have that range of motion. So by going about halfway, we can now secure the cable to the laser. So we'll plug those in, making sure that the connectors are facing properly so they just plug in with each other, and then we're going to secure the ring. And now we can go ahead and again do some cable maintenance. So we're going to give ourselves a little bit of slack. As you can see there, I got a little bit of bend in the wire, and I'm going to zip tie the cable to that peg of the Z-axis motor where you can see the router cables are zip tied to it as well. So we're going to give ourselves just a little bit of a slack, and then we're going to go ahead and install the zip tie to secure that cable there. We're going to use that front peg there to zip tie the wire to. And then we're going to take and trim off that excess zip tie. And then we're going to bring that cable straight back to the back peg. And we're going to secure another zip tie on the back peg as well. Go ahead and clean up that zip tie by trimming off the excess. And the remaining cable, we're going to just kind of keep hanging back off the back of the CNC. And we want to just basically kind of point it down that direction. And what we're going to do is we're going to now zip tie to the router cable. And so we're going to kind of feed down a couple of zip ties on that router cable to keep those together. Again, flexing the cable back just to make sure we have a nice little loop back there. And we're going to add in one more zip tie. So clean up your zip ties by trimming off the excess. And we're going to grab one more zip tie. And we're going to secure that wire a little bit lower on the router cable. So just above the cat track, we're going to throw in the last zip tie here. Okay, with that last zip tie secured, we want to move the Y gantry, Y minus and Y plus, back and forth to make sure that we left enough excess cable out that we have a good range of motion to both of our limits, away from you and to you. And once we've determined that, then that will complete the installation of the laser module, wiring harness, and the laser to the CNC machine. Alright, so in step 1, we installed the laser on the digital woodcarver CNC machine. In step 2, we went ahead and wired the laser's control module box to the CNC unit's control box. And we walked through those steps and everything, and we've got it all set up. Now we need to, in step 3, we need to bring in the files into our Vectric software, as well as our USB CNC controller software, our CNC USB controller software. Now, the post processor for the laser and the tool file for the laser we're going to bring into the Vectric software, and then in the CNC USB controller software we're going to adjust the setting file or create a new setting file if we happen to have a spindle on our unit versus a router. So let's start off with the Vectric software, and I'm going to go ahead and open up an instance of the Vectric software. Now I'm opening up Vectric VCarve Pro, but this is applicable to Desktop, Pro, or Aspire, depending on which software you're using with your new digital laser. So the first thing we want to do is, depending on when you purchased your digital woodcarver unit, you received a DVD that had DWC files printed on that disc. And within that DVD, we have folders that contain our CNC USB controller software. They contain miscellaneous sample files, our license codes, but they also contain, that DVD also contains a folder called Vectric Post. And if we open up that Vectric Post folder, we will see some files in there. And the files that we should have are, we should have a copy of our Whiteside 705 tool set, our 5-piece tool set. That's our tool file to bring into the tool database of the Vectric software if we have that particular bit set. There's also a text document talking about the type of post processor that we use in the Vectric software, whether it be the G-code inch tap post processor, or if you have version 9, the digital woodcarver inch tap post processor, or if you're working in millimeter, the digital woodcarver millimeter tap post processor, and again the G-code millimeter tap post processor. So either or are used. It just depends on which version you have. Now you should also have 2 other files in this Vectric Post folder, and one is going to be the digital laser, the 6-watt tool file that we're going to bring into the tool database. And the other is our DWC Laser Inch Tap Post Processor file that we'll be using when we calculate the toolpaths when we're working with the laser. So the first thing we need to do is bring these 2 files into the Vectric software. Now, if you happen to have bought your unit earlier in 2016, before we had the digital laser, your DVD, your DWC files disk may not have the laser files. But when you purchased your laser, we have either provided those files to you with your package, or we have sent them directly to your email. So wherever those files are located, whether you've downloaded them out of your email and saved them somewhere on your computer, or if there's a disk that is provided with your package, depending on how we deliver those files to you, we need to get those on the computer. And so the first thing we need to do before we bring the DWC Laser tool into the tool database, we need to take it off the disk and we need to put it onto our computer. And so what we're going to do is we're going to right click on this tool file, and we're going to go to copy, and we're going to navigate to our PC's main system, so this PC, and then we're going to go into the C drive. You're going to then look for the folder that says users, public documents, and then you're going to have a folder called Vectric Files. So in that Vectric Files folder is where you would right click, and if you wish, you can create a new folder here that's like a tool database folder, or you can just right click and paste that file in this Vectric Files main directory. So once we've done that, we're good there. So now let's navigate back to our DVD, and now we want to take our DWC Laser post-processor, our laser inch post-processor, and we need to bring that into the folder for post-processors for the Vectric software. So we're going to go ahead and right-click and copy that. And then we're going to, in our Vectric software, I'm going to minimize this, we're going to go to File, Open Application Data Folder. When we do that, it'll open up a file explorer with the applications data folder in there, and you'll find a folder that is called Post P. And so you can open that up, and we can just, anywhere in white space, we can just kind of right click and paste that post processor file in there. Okay. Once we've done that, we can close the application data folder, and now we're ready to kind of set up our tool database and bring that tool file over. So I'm going to create just a new file here, and I'm going to use the defaults that I have for this sample. So we're just going to click OK. And I'll get into a training on, creating your first design and everything with your laser in a separate video. Right now we're just getting all the files and everything set up for the main installation and setup of the laser. So with this, let's move over first to our design side of our software, or our CAM side, so our computer aided manufacturing side, and our toolpath operations. And the icon we're looking for is the tool database. So we're going to open that up. And now in the tool database, we can choose to take and put our laser tool in any one of the categories. And we do have like an engraving category, form tools, things like that, specialist tools. But what I want to do is, while I have Imperial Tools highlighted here, I'm going to just click New Group, and I'm going to create my Digital Laser Group. And I'm going to hit Enter to lock that name in. And while that name is still highlighted, I'm going to come down here to Import. And while I'm import, I'm going to navigate not off the DVD. We don't want to point to the DVD. We want to navigate to this PC, to our C drive, users, public documents, and then the Vectric files. And we want to point to that tool that we copied and pasted over here in the Vectric files. So we're going to select on that and select Open. And that will import the digital laser into our new group. Now, the laser defaults and settings and everything have been set up, except for one thing that we need to change, and it's the first thing we should really focus on, is our spindle speed. And when it comes to the laser, under the feeds and speeds, your spindle speed is, rather than using a router, we're using a laser. So we got to think about power settings. And you have a range of 0, meaning the laser would be off, to 10, and 10 would be the highest power. And so you can adjust this spindle speed or laser power between 0 and 10, and you can set it accordingly depending on the job that you're doing. Now for me, for my default in my tool database, I'm going to set my power setting to 8. And so we want to type in that 8 in that spindle speed box there. Okay. Now I've set your feed rate defaults in the file to 45 inches a minute, but of course you can adjust that up or down depending on what it is that you're working on, the job you're doing. And as I do more trainings and stuff on the laser and all, we're going to be experimenting with different projects, and we're going to look at different speeds and feeds and how they act. So you're going to get additional lessons. Again, this is just the installation and setup, your initial installation and setup of the laser. But for the tool database default, I'm going to set my power to 8, and I'm going to click Apply and lock that in. Okay, so we can go ahead and click OK and close our tool database. Now let's go ahead and just create a simple circle just for a demonstration here. Now when we are creating a toolpath for the laser, we will be using the quick engraving toolpath. So if we open that up, Notice here that I have the digital laser already in there, but if whatever your tool says, we can click select to open the tool database, and we can point to that new tool that we've just imported into the tool database and click OK. And that will be your setting there for your tool. Now for the depth and pressure, when you're zeroing out the laser on the machine, you're going to be setting the laser to where it's at a distance of 2 inches from the engraving surface, from your material that you're going to be engraving. And that 2 inches is the prime focal point of the beam. But now you can run some tests yourself, and you can do some different heights and lower it, raise it, and you can do tests. And what you're looking for, and you can fire off that beam, and what you're looking for is the smallest dot. And that would be the prime position for you for the smallest dot. And so 2 inches, we've already kind of done the work for you. 2 inches is about the prime focal point of the lens. And so that's where you're going to zero your z-axis out on the machine. Well, we don't want to differentiate from that when we are doing our engraving, so we're going to set our depth and pressure to 0. Okay, the depth and pressure 0 because we don't want the z-axis moving up and down from that 2-inch position that we've set. Now after that, we are either going to be doing an outline if we're going to be engraving the outline of our design, or we're going to be doing a fill engraving where it's engraving the internal areas of our design. So the first thing I'll do is I'll do an outline, and I'm going to just create a name down here, and I'm going to call this laser outline. Okay, and I'm going to calculate that, and you'll see the arrows and everything pop up here. Now if you were trying to preview this in your preview window like you would a normal carving toolpath, then you won't see any engraving or anything because we have our depth and pressure set to 0, so you won't actually see it in there. If you want to see the engraving and what it would look like, then change this depth and pressure to maybe like a 0.06 or something. But you want to make sure that before you calculate or before you save the toolpath, you want to recalculate it with a depth and pressure of 0. Okay, you don't want to leave it at that 16th. So we click calculate, and that created the toolpath. And now down here in our post processor, we're going to come down and we're going to look for our DWC or digital wood carver laser post processor, and we're not going to find it because we have not set or closed out the software to reset our post processor files in our data application. So what we need to do is we need to take that quick moment, and we're going to go ahead and close out of this, and I'm just going to file exit out of the Vectric software, and I'm not going to save my changes for right now, and I'm going to reopen it. And once we reopen it, now that toolpath, that post processor, not the toolpath, but the post processor will be in our list. It will reset that list and add that to our list. So I'm going to go ahead and create that new file again, and click OK. I'm going to draw my circle again that we had just a moment ago, and I'm going to jump back over to that quick engraving toolpath. And again, everything is kind of set from where I just was, where I left off there. And I will change this again to laser outline and click calculate. Now on my post processor, now I can drop that down and I can find that digital laser inch tap post processor, and you'll find it's in alphabetical order, and you'll find it next to our other 2 post processors in that list. So we'll click on the digital laser inch tap post processor, and now we can save that toolpath. And of course we would save it, and we would find an appropriate file. For me, I would come in and to my wherever I save my files, my desktop, and I would save that tap file. Now normally, if you've worked with me in your training sessions before, I've had you create a new folder that's called CNC jobs. Okay, and that's where all your jobs are stored, and so that would be a good place to create your laser job. So if we create a new folder in that CNC jobs folder, we can go our laser circle, we'll just call it, be generic on this. And now I can save that toolpath in there. Now, for the fill, if we were doing a fill toolpath, meaning we were engraving the interior areas of our design, we can use an offset pattern where it kind of circles around, or we can use a hatch. Now, me personally, I found that I like the hatch method for laser engraving. And we can either have a hatch angle of 0 if we're going along the x-axis, or 90 if we're going along the y-axis, depending on which way you're, engraving and everything. And so I've got a 90-degree angle set in here, and I can go ahead and I'm going to just call this my laser fill. Give it whatever name you want to, and I'm going to click calculate, and you'll see that it fills in that area. Now if we zoom in, you can see all the individual toolpath lines where that laser is going to be engraving. It's got about a 48% step over and stuff. And then again, once again, make sure we have the digital laser inch tap post processor, and we can save that toolpath, and we'll call it laser fill, and it's already brought me into my laser circle folder. Keeping me organized, so we can save that. And so, depending on your design, if you're bringing in images, or you've drawn something, your text or what have you, and you want to laser engrave it, you would use the quick engraving toolpath, and you're either going to be doing an outline or a fill. Okay, so again, we're not going to get into the doing design training and stuff like that. There's going to be a separate video to help you create your first project with your laser and create it. But also, we're going to be doing trainings every Tuesday and Thursday. If you're new, so every Tuesday and Thursday we do live training classes in our Facebook group that you'll have access to. So we've set our tool. We've got our tool in our tool database, and we've got our post processor in our post processor list. So the Vectric software is now got the appropriate files to work with our laser. So we can now go ahead and close out of the Vectric software, and I'm going to come into the CNC USB Controller software now, and I've got to adjust my setting file. Now, my particular CNC USB Controller software is not currently connected to my CNC machine. So you'll see that all of my buttons on the left and right side are grayed out. But we do want to make sure that we are using the correct setting file in our CNC controller software. And so you should have the wood grain background. And as it pops up, let's maximize this so it takes up the full screen. So we have this nice wood grain background. That's a visual identifier that we have the proper setting file installed. And so we need to make an adjustment to that setting file to include the laser on and off. Now, as I'm making this adjustment, because I'm not connected to my machine, the setting file will not let me set the correct parameter. So you want to make sure that you are plugged in to your CNC machine with your USB cable when you're setting your setting file. Okay, and so if we go up here to File, Settings, the settings box will open up. Give it just a second to pop up. It's kind of grabbing that. There we go. And now in our settings file, what we're looking for over here on the left menu is the spindle and coolant option. So we want to click on that and go into this main area. Now over here, we have a option called output pin speed. And if you remember from the tool, our speed, our RPMs, is our power setting for the laser, 0 to 10. And notice I've already got my min set at 0 and my max set at 10. We want to make sure we have that 0 and 10 in there. But we need to tell it which pin to controls the on and off of the laser. Now as you see the dashes here. I do not have options of a 1 pin, 6 pin, 2 pin, or anything like that, because I'm not connected to my CNC machine. So it's important that you are connected to your CNC machine. and verbally listen to which pin I'm telling you. You want to use the number 2 pin. Okay, on that output pin speed, you want to set that, drop that menu down and set it to the number 2. Okay, now I can of course set mine to number 2 currently right now, because again I am not connected to my CNC machine at this moment, but you want to set it to the number 2 pin. Once you've done that, you'll click OK, and now that we've set that setting, we need to export, go down to File, down to Export Settings, and we need to export that setting file to include the laser. And so what I tend to do, if you see here that I've already created a mill laser setting file for myself today, and so I have when I exported that, it's the DWC mill, and I have underscore laser, so it tells me that it does the milling and the laser both. But I, instead of the 617, which is was our original setting file, or yours may be a 515, that is basically kind of a date when that file was created. So what I tend to do is I went ahead and on my new file name on this that I'm exporting is 112817 with underscores in between, no spaces in that file name. And so that is my new setting file. So I'll go ahead and just click save, and it'll ask me if I want to replace it, and in this case, yes I do. You won't have that option because you're creating a new file. Now if you have the routers, the Hitachi, Bosch, or Porter cable, then you can set your laser setting file and your milling setting file as one file, just like we just did. If you have one of our water-cooled spindles, then you need to create a completely separate setting file for your laser. So what you want to do is you want to export that, make that adjustment on that setting, and you want to export that out and create a completely different name for your laser. So you're going to have one for your spindle, one for your laser. But if you're working with a router, it's just one file. Now, here's some two very important key points when you're working with the laser and when you're working with your CNC machine. So when we're working with the laser, then on the CNC machine, we need to make sure that the router switch on the top of the router is in the off position when we're using the laser. Okay? We need to make sure that the router is in the off position because we don't want the router turning on when we hit the start button. Now, the second most important thing is when we are doing milling with the router, we want to make sure that we take our wing nuts off and unhook, unscrew, connect our laser, and we want to remove the laser from the front of the bracket. We do not want the laser on the CNC machine while we're engraving, because we don't want that engraving sawdust and stuff to get into the laser's fan and diode and everything in there, into the housing. We don't want it accumulating or building up dust in there and debris. So we want to make sure we remove the laser from the CNC machine when we're working with the router. Okay, that's two very key important parts. Now, this completes this video on the installation of your laser, the wiring of the laser, and then the setup of your Vectric software for the post processor and the tool file, as well as your CNC controller software, CNC USB controller software for the setting file. Now, of course, if you have any questions, you can always email us at sales@digitalwoodcarver.com, or you can call me directly, and my phone number will be provided to you during our initial orientation and everything for any kind of calls. This completes this video. I want to thank you very much for your purchase of your digital laser as well as your business with Digital Woodcarver. It's greatly appreciated. I look forward to working with you more in the future and on your engravings and things. And just keep in mind there's going to be a second or separate video where we create your first laser engraving file. Okay, so look for that video. It should be either in the Facebook group for viewing and download and training instruction, or we may have provided it to you with your other files that we provided to you in email or something. Just depending on how we're going to distribute that first initial training video. Most likely it will be in our Facebook group, so you can get orientated to that group, which is a wealth of knowledge. Again, my name is Laney Shaughnessy. I'm your instructor, and thank you for your business and your time. Have a great day.